Hey everybody, it's LavenderTowne, and today I wanted to give you guys my tips and tricks on how to accurately critique your art so that you can improve. This is something that used to really stress me out when I was first getting started. I would always draw something and feel really good about it right when I ended the drawing, and then only a couple hours later I would start to notice all these errors and mistakes and things I really didn't like, and I couldn't understand why I couldn't seem to accurately see what my art looked like. You may also notice that there's artists out there who either are really, really good and then they constantly hate on their own art, or people who seem really, really confident despite the fact that they still have a lot to work on. That's because it's actually incredibly difficult to see your art the way that an outsider would, just by the nature of how long you've been staring at it, as well as a bunch of other factors that aren't an element for your audience. So there are a few ways to work around this so that you can see your art the way it really is, so that you can make it the way that you want. So the first thing I wanted to do was do sort of the easy form of this, and that's going back and looking at a really old piece of art, and that allows you to really see your mistakes very clearly, because when you look at art that's over a year old, especially if it's multiple years old, you're going to be able to see the mistakes like somebody else drew them, basically, because you're so distant away from your old art that your eyes are not going to be extra kind, or, well, they might be a little extra harsh. The first thing that you want to do is to try to figure out exactly what's jumping out at you, other than just the general discomfort of realizing that your old art is kind of hard to look at. And for me, a lot of the things that really stress me out about this piece are just exaggerated forms of what I'm still trying to improve in my own art now. So that's another reason why this exercise of going back and drawing old art can be really, really useful, because oftentimes it just sort of represents an easier to see example of the problems that you might be struggling with now that you may not even be aware of. So posing has always been a difficulty for me. I think for a lot of artists it's really difficult to get the perfect pose that looks natural but also like dynamic and stylish enough. That's definitely something I really struggled with back in the day. I drew this picture about 10 years ago, so I was definitely still learning digital art and art in general. Even the basics I really didn't have covered at all, and so it really helps me see kind of what I was struggling with back then. I had her pose really, really sort of stiff and awkward, and her facial expression too, which is really surprising to me, because I remember thinking that I was very good at showing emotions in my characters, but I couldn't tell you, even if my life depended on it, what the character in the original picture is supposed to be feeling. It's a very stiff and non-expressive facial expression, so I really don't know what I was going for there. This process of picking out the things that I specifically don't like and trying to redraw them better in the second picture is a really important step if you're going to do this exercise. Don't just try to redraw it with more details or better in general, because it's really hard to sort of do that. It's just too much to think about. It's way better to pick out the things that you think are the most atrociously bad and work on that for the next one. Then it's more of a deliberate style of practice, and it's going to help you a lot more, in my opinion. The things I wanted to work on in this one most are, like I said, a better pose, a stronger emotional sort of look on her face. Obviously I'm not going to do anything crazy, but just give her a little more personality. And then lastly, to deal with these super bright acidic colors in a way that looks a little bit more harmonious and a little bit of a nicer image. I also wanted to really make sure that she was standing out from her background, because boy, I did such a bad job of that in the first one. It's just really like a super neon attack on your eyes, and while I do like really bright colors in the right context, I really needed to tone down either the warms or the cools in order to let any of the colors shine. Otherwise it's just everything is coming at you at once. Speaking of her low expression face, never trust somebody's either compliments or insults about your art wholeheartedly unless you have some evidence to back it up, because I used to get compliments from people all the time about the way I drew the emotions in my characters, and looking back, they were really, really bad. I also got criticized for some stuff that really wasn't the worst thing about it, though looking back at old art, kind of everything looked terrible to me. But basically what I'm saying is when you're trying to improve your art, do listen to other people's opinions, but also try and figure out ways for you to see it more clearly, rather than basing it blindly on what other people say. One of the more common tricks, but a time-honored classic because it works so well, is to flip your art while you're working on it. Now, this can cause a bit of a shock because when you flip your art for the first time, you may be really startled by how wonky and messed up it looks. It's interesting because I saw some people were trying out an inverted filter on their face and really upset with how their face looked because they weren't used to seeing it inverted. And really the same thing works with your art. It immediately draws your attention to anything that is not symmetrical or a little bit off, and it's going to allow you to make your art look a lot more balanced. Now, if you do this constantly as you draw, like every single stroke, you will eventually get used to both sides of the image. So I don't actually recommend overdoing it. The best way to do it, in my opinion, is to do your rough sketch, flip it, do some inking, flip it before you're finished, and ink some more, and then flip it again. Basically, you just want to flip it a couple times during the process, not too many, and the most important time to flip it is before you start your ink, because changing your ink dramatically is a lot more tedious than changing around your sketches, especially if you're working digital and you can just lasso things and make them smaller or change the angle on them. It makes it really painless, and it doesn't have to be so stressful, like you're constantly fighting your own eyes trying to understand what you're looking at. So that's really my recommendation there. I used to go completely crazy with the flipping and do it just constantly, and that's really not a good thing either. It doesn't work as effectively, and you'll just go insane constantly trying to move things around. So yeah, just flip about maybe 5 times during the process and at specific times, not just sort of randomly to torture yourself. This is definitely something you have to do. I mean, it's almost too obvious to even mention, but I know there's some people out there that don't know about flipping their art. And if you're a traditional artist and you want to flip your art, just hold it up to a sunny window backwards, and that will help. Or if you have a light box, that also works just as well. Once it's finished and you're completely done with it, don't flip it again, otherwise you're gonna freak out. I mean, you can if you're pretty confident that there's nothing wrong with it, but way too many times I forgot to flip it until the very last second when I thought I was done, and then I flipped it, and man, that's just pure despair. So remember to do it before then. Another thing that you can do if you want to get a clearer, fresher view of your art is just to step away from it and not look at it at all for at least 3 hours. It's not as good as being away from it for longer periods of time, but even just a few hours away from it can help you get a fresh set of eyes on it, and that's really the most important part of being able to critique your art properly. Also, you gotta try really hard not to consider how hard you worked on it or how much time you spent on it, because that kind of stuff doesn't really affect how other people see it. And it can be really hard to do that when you've spent a lot of time on something, especially if there's something particularly meticulous or detail-oriented that you had to do. But you want to try to not think about that stuff at all and really just look at the image on its own. I used to torture myself by making myself do these like really, really long, tedious little bits of texture and detail because I thought that inherently putting more time into your art makes it better automatically. But truthfully, it really is only the amount that you add to it. It really doesn't matter how long it takes. So try not to give yourself too many extra bonus points just for something being really tedious. I don't know if that's a relatable thing, but that's definitely something I used to think sort of subconsciously. And that's about it for my tips and tricks on how to properly critique your art. Let me know if you guys have any questions about this in the comments below, and I'll try to answer as many as I can in the first few hours of me posting this as well. Sorry if this video feels a little rushed. I was really sick this whole week, but I'm finally better, so we should be back on track moving forward. Thank you so much for watching till the end, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you to all my patrons, including Bella Story, Braggy, Kapalpon Lion, Clockwork Construct, Dr. Casket, Alaria Louie, Elizabeth Albumgreer, The Animator, Hachiubi, Yara Formoso, Imagine Creation, Ivan Rodriguez, JJJ, Joseph Kopel, Katie Alina, Liblibla, Micah Dactyl, Mr. Dr. Pants, Naoto Kamigire, Nora Cornelison, Ollie, Pixel Badlands, Reddit, Rosie Warlock, Rudy, Sergeant Pendulum, Some Mediocre Artists, The Artsy Moosey Boy, and Zoe Stardust.